The board voted to dilute my shares to nothing. My business partner wouldn't meet my eyes as security escorted me out of the company I built. As I reached the door, I whispered to him, "You should have reread clause 17.b." 6 months later, I walked back through that same door as the sole owner while he was forced to sell his house to pay the damages I won in court. My name is Michael, and this story starts with a friendship that began in college. Ryan Chun was my roommate, study partner, and honestly, one of the smartest people I knew. While I was the creative type, always sketching app interfaces and dreaming up business ideas, Ryan was the practical one who could turn those dreams into spreadsheets and business plans. After graduation, I was working at a small marketing agency, frustrated that none of my app ideas ever got beyond the concept stage. I developed what I thought was a revolutionary idea for a project management tool that used AI to predict bottlenecks and automatically redistribute workloads. I called it FlowSync. Ryan was working at Goldman Sachs, making great money, but equally frustrated with corporate life. When I pitched FlowSync to him over beers one night, his eyes lit up. "Michael, this could actually work," he said, pulling out his phone to start taking notes. "I know the enterprise software market inside and out. Companies are desperate for productivity solutions." Within a month, we decided to quit our jobs and start FlowSync together. I would handle product development and design, while Ryan would manage business operations, fundraising, and financial planning. Equal partners, 50-50 ownership split. I was naive about a lot of things back then, but I wasn't completely stupid. I'd heard horror stories about business partnerships gone wrong, friends who'd built companies together only to have one partner push out the other. So when we were drawing up our founding documents, I insisted on what our lawyer called a bad actor clause. "What's that?" Ryan asked during our meeting with the attorney. "It's protection against fraud or bad faith actions by either founder," the lawyer explained. "Basically, if either of you tries to screw over the other through deception or illegal means, the wrong party can claim the other's shares and seek damages." Ryan laughed. "Michael, we're best friends. You really think we need that?" "It's just insurance," I said. "Like fire insurance on your house. You hope you never need it, but if something happens, you're glad you have it." Ryan shrugged and signed the documents. Clause 17.b was now part of our corporate bylaws. In the event that a founder is found to have acted in fraudulent bad faith to gain control or ownership at the expense of another founder, all shares held by the offending party shall be forfeit to the wrong party, and personal assets may be seized to compensate for damages. We celebrated that night, toasting our new company and our bright future together. For the first 2 years, everything was perfect. FlowSync launched 6 months after we quit our jobs, and it was immediately clear we had something special. The AI-powered workflow optimization was genuinely revolutionary. Companies that implemented our system saw productivity increases of 25 to 40%. Ryan proved to be a brilliant business strategist. He positioned us perfectly in the market, identified our ideal customers, and built relationships with key industry players. Meanwhile, I focused on product development, constantly improving our algorithms and user experience based on customer feedback. Our first major client was a mid-sized consulting firm that saw their project completion times drop by 35% after implementing FlowSync. Word spread quickly in their industry network, and we started getting inquiries from much larger companies. "Michael, we need to talk about scaling," Ryan said during one of our weekly partner meetings. "I'm getting calls from companies that want to implement FlowSync across thousands of employees. We need serious infrastructure investment." That's when we started raising money. Ryan led the fundraising process, while I focused on building the technical team we need to support enterprise clients. Our Series A round raised $5 million from a prestigious Silicon Valley firm, valuing FlowSync at $20 million. I was thrilled. My 50% stake was suddenly worth $10 million on paper, and we were just getting started. Ryan handled all the investor communications and board meetings. He was naturally gifted at that side of the business. He could translate our technical innovations into business language that investors understood. I was happy to let him manage those relationships while I focused on what I did best. But looking back, I can see this was when things started to change. Ryan began working longer hours, taking more investor meetings, and generally becoming the external face of FlowSync. When tech reporters wanted to interview the founder, they usually spoke with Ryan because he was more polished and business-focused. "You're the technical genius," he'd tell me. "I'm just handling the boring business stuff so you can focus on innovation." I appreciated that division of labor at the time. I genuinely preferred building products to giving interviews or sitting through board presentations about quarterly revenue projections. Our Series B round raised $15 million at a $75 million valuation. My stake was now worth $37.5 million. We were hiring rapidly, expanding into new markets, and FlowSync was becoming a major player in the enterprise software space. But I started noticing subtle changes in how Ryan talked about the company's origin and direction. In interviews, he'd say things like, I founded FlowSync to solve the productivity challenges I'd observed during my time in investment banking. Not we founded, just I founded. When reporters asked about my role, Ryan would describe me as his technical co-founder, or head of product development, language that made it sound like I was a very early employee rather than an equal partner. It's just marketing speak, Ryan explained when I brought it up. Investors and press prefer simple narratives. The important thing is we both know the truth about our partnership. I let it slide because our friendship still felt strong and the business was thriving. Besides, what did it matter how the press described our roles as long as we were both getting rich? I was about to learn exactly how much it mattered. The first sign of real trouble came during our Series C fundraising discussions. FlowSync was now generating $50 million in annual revenue, and Ryan was talking to investors about a round that would value us at over $300 million. There's just one issue, Ryan told me during what I thought was a routine partner meeting. The lead investor wants to see some changes in our equity structure. What kind of changes? They're concerned about having two equal founders with 50% control each. They want clearer leadership structure and decision-making authority. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. What does that mean exactly? Ryan pulled out a document that looked like it had been prepared by lawyers. They want me to have majority control as CEO, with you maintaining a significant stake as CTO. Nothing changes operationally. You'd still run all technical decisions. The proposed structure would give Ryan 45% ownership and me 35%, with the remaining 20% going to the investor pool and employee stock options. Ryan, that's a 15% reduction in my ownership. That's worth millions of dollars. But Michael, look at the total valuation. Your 35% of a $300 million company is worth $105 million. That's way more than your current 50% of our existing valuation. He wasn't wrong about the math, but something felt off about the whole conversation. Why does the investor care about our internal equity split? And why do you need to be the majority owner? Ryan's explanation was smooth and practiced. Institutional investors want clear command structure. When there are two equal founders, it can create decision-making bottlenecks that hurt growth. They see me as the business leader and you as the technical leader, so this structure reflects that reality. The pressure was intense. We had term sheets from multiple investors, all contingent on this equity restructuring. If I refused, we'd lose the funding round and potentially damage our growth trajectory. I need to think about this, I said. Of course, Ryan replied. But Michael, we need to move fast. These investors have other opportunities they're considering. That night, I called our original lawyer to discuss the proposed changes. He was concerned. Michael, this is a significant dilution of your position. Are you comfortable giving up control of the company you co-founded? Ryan says it's just about satisfying investor preferences. The business side has always been his strength. But you're not just losing financial upside, you're losing voting control. If Ryan has 45% and you have 35%, he can make major decisions without your agreement. I spent a week agonizing over the decision. Ultimately, I signed the amended agreements because I trusted Ryan and believed we were building something bigger together. The Series C closed at a $325 million valuation. My 35% stake was worth $113 million on paper, more money than I'd ever imagined having. But I'd given up control of the company I'd created, and I was about to learn what that really meant. The changes started immediately after the Series C closed. Ryan began making unilateral decisions about company direction, hiring, and strategic partnerships without consulting me. You focus on the product roadmap, he'd say when I questioned these decisions. I'll handle the business strategy. But the product roadmap was being driven by business decisions I had no input on. When Ryan decided to pivot FlowSync towards serving smaller companies instead of enterprise clients, it required completely rebuilding our technical architecture. This is a major strategic shift, I argued during one heated discussion. We should be making this decision together. Michael, the board has already approved this direction. We need to move fast to capture market share in the SMB space. The board? I'm a founder and major shareholder. Shouldn't I be part of board discussions about fundamental strategy changes? Ryan's expression was carefully neutral. You're welcome to attend board meetings, but the business decisions are really my domain. Your expertise is in product development. I started paying closer attention to corporate communications and board materials. What I discovered was disturbing. Ryan was systematically positioning himself as the sole visionary founder while describing me as the technical implementer of his business vision. In board presentations, he'd show slides about my strategy for FlowSync's growth and my vision for the product evolution. When discussing technical innovations, he'd say things like, I've directed our technical team to explore AI enhancements, as if I was just another employee implementing his ideas. The most painful part was watching him rewrite the history of FlowSync's creation. In interviews and investor presentations, Ryan would describe how he'd identified the market opportunity during his time in investment banking and then recruited technical talent to build the solution. I wasn't just being marginalized, I was being erased from a founding story. When I confronted Ryan about this directly, his response was chilling. "Michael, you're being paranoid. We're both making money, the company is growing, and you have complete control over the technical aspects. What more do you want? I want to be treated as an equal partner in the company we built together." But we're not equal partners anymore. The equity structure reflects our actual roles. I'm the CEO responsible for business strategy and growth. You're the CTO responsible for product development. That's how successful companies operate. I realized that Ryan had used the Series C restructuring to formalize what he'd been doing informally, positioning himself as the real founder and me as his technical hire. But he wasn't done yet. The final betrayal came when Ryan announced we were raising a Series D round to accelerate international expansion. The Series D term sheet was presented to me as a fait accompli. Ryan had already negotiated the basic terms with lead investors and just needed my signature to close the round. The proposed structure was even worse than I'd feared. My ownership would be diluted from 35% to 22%, while Ryan's would go from 45% to 43%, a much smaller reduction. How is this possible? I demanded. Why am I being diluted proportionally more than you? Ryan's explanation was pure corporate doublespeak. The investors want to expand the employee option pool to attract top talent. Since you're more involved in technical hiring, they're allocating some of the dilution to stock options for your team. It was complete nonsense, but the legal documents were complex enough that I couldn't immediately identify exactly how I was being cheated. "I'm not signing this," I said. Ryan's mask finally slipped. "Michael, you don't have a choice. I have majority control, and the board has already approved this funding round. You can either sign willingly and maintain your reduced stake, or we can proceed without your consent and you'll end up with even less. You can't make major decisions without founder approval. Actually, I can. Check the bylaws from our Series C amendments. Decisions requiring founder approval need majority founder consent. I am the majority founder." I felt sick as I realized how completely I'd been outmaneuvered. Every decision I'd agreed to over the past 2 years had been designed to gradually transfer control away from me and to Ryan. The Series D closed without my signature. My stake was diluted to 18% while Ryan maintained 41% ownership. I was now a minority shareholder in the company I'd created. But Ryan still wasn't satisfied. 2 months after the Series D, he called a board meeting to discuss leadership structure optimization. The proposal was to transition FlowSync to a single founder CEO structure, with Ryan as the sole founder and me as an employee with stock options. This isn't personal, Michael. It's about presenting a clean leadership narrative to investors and potential acquirers. The board vote was unanimous. Remove Michael as co-founder, reduce his equity to 3%, and offer him a generous employment contract as CTO. Security escorted me out that same day. But as I left the building, I remembered something that Ryan had apparently forgotten. Clause 17.b. I hired the best business litigation attorney in the city, Sandra Walsh, who'd built her reputation representing founders in disputes with investors and co-founders. "Tell me everything," she said during our first meeting. I explained the systematic dilution, the rewriting of company history, and the final vote to remove me as co-founder. "This sounds like classic founder fraud," Sandra said. "But we'll need to prove intentional deception and bad faith actions. Do you have access to any internal communications?" I was locked out of all company systems when they escorted me out. "That's okay. We'll get access through legal discovery once we file suit." Sandra filed a lawsuit invoking Clause 17.b, seeking restoration of my full 50% ownership plus damages for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. Ryan's initial response was to characterize the lawsuit as a disgruntled former employee trying to extort money from a successful company. But everything changed when Sandra's discovery requests started uncovering internal communications. The smoking gun came from Ryan's email archives. Sandra found a message thread between Ryan and our Series B lead investor from 3 years earlier. "How do I gradually reduce my co-founder's control without triggering the bad actor clause in our bylaws? He's talented but not business-minded, and I need majority control to execute my growth strategy." The response from the investor was equally damning. Standard approach is gradual dilution through funding rounds plus narrative control. Position yourself as the business founder and him as technical hire. Document everything as investor requirements rather than your personal preference. Sandra found dozens of similar communications showing Ryan had been planning to push me out from almost the moment we received our first major investment. Even worse were the communications with board members and journalists. Ryan had actively spread false information about my role in founding FlowSync, claiming I joined as his first technical hire rather than as an equal co-founder. "This is textbook fraud," Sandra told me after reviewing the documents. "He deliberately misrepresented your founding role to investors and systematically worked to devalue your ownership through deceptive means." The evidence was overwhelming. Ryan had violated his fiduciary duty as a co-founder, committed fraud in his communications with investors, and acted in bad faith to seize control of the company. Under Clause 17.b, that meant all of his shares would be forfeit to me, plus personal damages. Ryan's legal team tried every possible defense. They argued that business disputes between founders were normal, that dilution through funding rounds was standard practice, and that my reduced role reflected my actual contributions to the company's growth. But Sandra had the receipts. Email after email showing premeditated fraud. Internal presentations where Ryan took sole credit for innovations we developed together. Communications with investors that deliberately minimized my contributions to make his case for majority control. The most damaging evidence was a recorded board meeting where Ryan explicitly stated, "Michael created the original technology, but I've built the business around it. Going forward, FlowSync's success will be driven by my business strategy rather than his technical contributions." The judge was clearly disgusted by Ryan's behavior. During closing arguments, she said, "This case represents a textbook example of why fiduciary duties exist between business partners. The defendant systematically violated the trust that makes entrepreneurial partnerships possible." The ruling was everything I'd hoped for and more. Ryan's 41% stake in FlowSync was forfeit under Clause 17.b, bringing my ownership to 59%, majority control of the company. Additionally, Ryan was personally liable for $15 million in damages for the value he'd fraudulently extracted from my ownership over the years. But the personal damages went beyond just financial compensation. The court ordered Ryan to pay my legal fees, $2.3 million, and imposed an additional $5 million penalty for egregious violations of fiduciary duty. Ryan was also banned from serving as an officer or director of any corporation for 5 years. The total judgment was $22.3 million, most of which had to be paid immediately. Ryan was forced to sell his house, his cars, and liquidate his investment accounts to pay the damages. The man who'd thought he was clever enough to steal my company ended up personally bankrupted by his own greed. Walking back into FlowSync as the majority owner was surreal. The same employees who'd watched me get escorted out 6 months earlier were now reporting to me as their CEO. My first decision was to restore accurate founding history in all company communications. Press releases, investor materials, and the company website were updated to reflect that FlowSync was co-founded by both Ryan and me, with proper credit for our respective contributions. The second decision was harder: what to do about the employees who'd supported Ryan during his systematic betrayal. Several senior executives had actively participated in marginalizing me and rewriting company history. The head of business development had repeatedly told clients that Ryan was the founder, while I was just the technical guy. The VP of marketing had crafted press strategies designed to minimize my visibility and maximize Ryan's. I cleaned house, but I tried to be fair about it. People who'd simply followed Ryan's leadership without actively participating in the deception kept their jobs. Those who'd knowingly helped execute his fraud were terminated with generous severance packages. "I'm not interested in revenge against individuals," I told the management team during my first meeting as CEO. "But I am committed to rebuilding a culture based on honesty and ethical behavior." FlowSync's business actually thrived after Ryan's departure. Without his constant political maneuvering and narrative manipulation, we could focus entirely on building great products and serving customers. Within a year, our revenue had grown by 40%, and we'd launched 3 major product innovations that significantly expanded our market presence. The story became a cautionary tale in Silicon Valley business circles. Always read the fine print became shorthand for making sure you understand every clause in your founding documents. But the most important lesson was about the value of preparation and paranoia in business partnerships. That bad actor clause I'd insisted on seemed unnecessary when Ryan and I were best friends building our dream company. It felt like paranoia, like planning for a betrayal that would never happen. But business partnerships change people. Success, money, and power can transform even the closest relationships. The legal protections you put in place when times are good become crucial when times are bad. Ryan and I never spoke again after the court judgment. He moved to another city and started over with a consulting practice focused on small business strategy. The non-compete clause in our original partnership agreement prevented him from working in enterprise software for several years. I occasionally wonder if he learned anything from experience, or if he just sees himself as the victim of an unfair legal system. The truth is, I don't hate Ryan anymore. The anger and betrayal I felt during those dark months has been replaced by something closer to pity. He destroyed our friendship and his own financial future because he couldn't handle sharing credit for something we'd built together. FlowSync continues to grow and innovate. We went public 3 years after I regained control at a valuation that made my stake worth over $400 million. The company that Ryan tried to steal from me is now worth more than either of us ever imagined. But the money isn't the most important part of this story. The real victory was proving that ethical behavior and legal preparation can triumph over fraud and manipulation. Every entrepreneur should remember, your business partnerships will face challenges. Success brings pressure, ego conflicts, and difficult decisions about control and credit. The legal agreements you put in place at the beginning aren't just formalities. They're the foundation that will determine whether your partnership survives or destroys itself. That bad actor clause saved my company and my future. It turned Ryan's systematic fraud from a devastating loss into the biggest mistake of his career. My business partner diluted my shares and voted me out, thinking he'd won our entrepreneurial chess match. But he'd forgotten about the nuclear clause I'd insisted on years earlier, the one that let me seize everything when his greed finally crossed the line into fraud. Always get it in writing. Always plan for betrayal, even from people you trust completely. And always remember, the paranoia that feels excessive when your friends might be the wisdom that saves you when you're enemies. The best revenge isn't just getting your company back, it's building it into something bigger than the person who tried to steal it ever imagined possible.